Doing great. Great to have you here. Were you at the Lakers game last night?
Not last night, but I've been to a bunch recently, and it seems to me like the theme right now is inconsistency. Like I saw them just beat the brakes off the Atlanta Hawks the other night, right after that Trae Young trade. Everyone's getting excited. Oh, Jalen Johnson's going to be the face of the franchise, and he had trouble keeping up with LeBron James, who's almost twice as old as him. So that could give you some cause for concern there in Atlanta. But for the Lakers, it's just been up and down. I mean, they might beat Atlanta by 10, 15, 20, look great. They might lose to Charlotte, a couple nights later by 15, 20, 25 points. It's just real up and down. And what that tells you is you don't have a defensive backbone, right? That's like the surest sign, especially in NBA basketball, but really any level of basketball. If you don't have a legit shell defense that can get stops and everybody trusts everybody, your offense is rolling, you're going to look great. Shots aren't going in. Somebody's a little tired. You're going to look horrible. And that's really been the Lakers story. They have so many blowout losses this year. They have a lot of good wins. They're still in a pretty good spot in the standings, but it's the type of team you really can't trust because you can't trust the defense.
Boy, I think that sums it up in a nutshell because the blowout losses is very interesting. It's like when the bottom falls out, it just collapses on them. And they don't have the ability, if they don't have control of the offensive flow of the game, they don't seem to have the ability, A, to come back, or B, to be able to go to anything resembling depth to give them a lift. Like when I look at the numbers from last night's beatdown by the Charlotte Hornets in L.A., they couldn't stop anybody, and their bench production once you went past Marcus Smart, nothing even close to double figures from any of their bench people. And I guess where I would go as well. And by the way, Luka and LeBron's numbers were great.
They always are, aren't they?
They always are. Their numbers are great on the offensive end. But aren't the Lakers in a position, Ben, where they've got to do something before the trade deadline? Like nobody's got to do anything, but don't they have to do something to get something resembling a wing defender who could come in and at least give them an opportunity to build around what you would call a stopper?
I think they're far enough away from being like a true tier A championship contender that the goal for this trade deadline really should be, again, remolding the roster around Luka. And at this point, they've had enough time to evaluate Luka. They know what he does well. They know what his shortcomings are, right? They had the right idea going to grab a Marcus Smart over the summer because that's going to be your perimeter stopper. He's going to take on the difficult assignments. Luka can, maybe rest a little bit more on defense, or you could hide him, right? But Marcus Smart is not who he was 5 years ago.
Right.
I think he's at a point now where he's been into decline. And so that still looks like a hole. Your point on the wings as well. I mean, LeBron, a lot of times he gets that assignment, but the other guys who they have in the mix, especially the younger players like a Dalton Connect or, those guys aren't bringing anything defensively. And so they really lose matchups there. And I think the biggest disappointment, honestly, though, has got to be DeAndre Ayton in the middle, because that was their big swing move of the summer. It was all lined up. Portland did them a favor, really, by buying DeAndre Ayton out. They thought a change of scenery could reinvigorate him. And maybe it did for about a month, but he's back to his old ways, his habits of really not being locked in every single position. You can't really trust him to cover things up defensively. He's not a big physical guy. He kind of shies from contact, even though he's got the amazing body. And so there's been opportunities here recently where he's sitting in the fourth quarter because Redick is just kind of over him, and they just don't like his energy. And so now you're saying, well, at least they come by their bad defense, honestly. If they can't guard the perimeter, they don't have the wing defenders, and the center's not doing it, well, now you're pretty far away. And so that's why I say look at the trade deadline as an opportunity to just go into the right direction, as opposed to, I think a lot of times the Lakers, it gets talked about as like, what move can make them a championship contender? And, I'm even seeing like the rumors out there of like, oh, trade Austin Reeves for Jaren Jackson Jr. and, like a big swing type move. I don't know if that's what they need. I just think that they need to kind of steer this thing a little bit closer, lay the groundwork better for next year, when I think that they could have a chance to, maybe be a little bit more competitive. Because not that you want to write this year off completely, but you look at how OKC defends. You look at the grit we've seen from Denver without a Joker here. You look at Minnesota, and they can really defend and raise their level when they want to. That's a level the Lakers can't get to, and it's just not going to happen this year defensively. And so you can still win a series maybe if things break right, but you're still pretty far away. So this doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all. Just make some progress.
Well, here's one thought for a trade, and I'm thinking, you just did your midseason awards, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, Ben. But what one category you didn't go into was the all malcontent team, and I think. And I think if you wanted to do that,
long list.
No kidding. You've got, Ja will be your point guard. I think DeAndre would be in the running for the post position. But the other guy who has been thrown into the discussions lately for a number of different franchises is Kuminga from Golden State. And how would you feel about adding a guy like, who knows what happens behind closed doors? It's always, I think, hard for us mere mortals to look at somebody with that many zeros at the end of their paycheck every month and relate to why you're upset and why you can't get along with your coach or can't go out on the court and try hard. We don't live in that world. But a guy like Kuminga, and I'm being facetious on the Lakers, is he a fit for a team like the Lakers who need somebody with his kind of athletic ability, his kind of body, his kind of skill set, quite honestly? But just like Morant, just like Ayton, what you're bringing into your, team culture, which is a big point of emphasis now, that's scary stuff. Like, what's going to like with Ayton? You like you said, big swing. He's still the same guy. Leopard doesn't change his spots.
Yeah, I would be pretty hesitant to make a move for Kuminga if I was the Lakers. I mean, the main reason why is it's clear that he values and his agent values what he can do much more than the teams did or much more than the market has. And so he's got an option coming up on this summer. And so if you're trading for him, there's uncertainty there. I mean, some teams might decide to trade for him and just let him go so they can have the salary cap relief. If you're trading for him as a player, you have to really be ready to invest real money because they just showed with kind of a holdout last summer that they really want to get paid. I understand the appeal physically to a player like Kuminga, but when you go skill by skill, there's really not a lot there. Can he shoot the threes? No. Can he attack off the dribble and really create offense for himself at the rim? No. Does he understand good shot selection? No. Is he a multi-positional defender, where you can really just throw him out there and expect him to be a lockdown guy? No. Does he understand team concepts? I mean, that's probably what drives Steve Kerr crazy. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's all about ball movement and player movement with that Golden State Warriors offense and unselfishness and understanding that we got to feed Steph the ball because he's the greatest shooter ever, one of the greatest players ever. And that's really been oil and water for Kuminga. He hasn't wanted to do that. He wants to go out there and kind of play his own isolation game. So you add all these things up. Is he a good passer? No. Does he work hard on the glass? Hit or miss? So what's the appeal here? Just because he looks good, like he's big, strong. I mean, I don't know if I really see it with him. And so, I think that's why it's been a tricky trade market. There are going to be teams out there that say buy low on the youth. I understand that. But if you're the Lakers, I'm not sure how appealing that is because you're in win now mode. You're not trying to develop a single person, right? You want all these guys to come in and be able to do it. And you want them to be cheap. And actually, Kuminga's not that cheap anymore either. So I think that'd be a stay away for the Lakers. And we'll see. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about maybe teams like Sacramento or Phoenix would have interest in Kuminga. And then you could see that a little bit because this is more about like a 2 or 3 year plan where you're trying to coax something great out of them as opposed to a plug and play. And we want to be contenders next year.
Other than that, he's great. But
yeah,
but I think the plug and play is really interesting because I look at Phoenix, for instance, and the marvelous turnaround they've got. And a lot of the reason seems to emanate from, much as opponents hate him, teammates love him, Dylan Brooks, what he's brought. And the thing about Brooks, he's having a career year statistically, but you never really measure his impact on a team so much statistically as you do in work ethic. Booker has been rejuvenated and has become a good player on both ends, sharing the ball more readily. I mean, that whole team has just spun around. So now you bring a guy in like that, and it's like, why do you want to mess with it? And I really think, Ben, and I value your insight on this. That's why the trade market after Luka, it's like everybody said, wait a second, what really works in the NBA now? Those big trades don't work. Now, obviously, Nico Harrison made one of the dumbest, dumbest trades of all time. That's an extreme, absurd example. But people are saying, no, it's working in OKC where they made one trade. They got lucky with SGA, but it's really what they've done with building their network around, building their culture. The Spurs were long suffering, but look at the results they're getting now. We don't have to go out and get a John Morant and have to deal with his crap in the nightclubs. We don't have to take a chance on the only thing that I think Kuminga passes is the eye test. When you go beyond that as a player, as a contributor, as a teammate, it's kind of a bust. So
the things I look for right now in terms of winning basketball, like you're describing with that OKC model, and some Phoenix trying to kind of switch up their model. Look, depth, defense, and then touch and feel. Those are the characteristics that teams need to have. So just big hulking athleticism, that's not necessarily in vogue right now. And then consolidating lots and lots of money into 2 or 3 stars makes it difficult to have all that depth that you're going to need to keep up, especially because the pace of play is going so fast and because you have to cover so much ground defensively with shooters at 4 or 5 positions every single night and lots of spread bigs. So you have just all this pressure on your big guys to be able to cover ground. If you have a bunch of expensive players at the top of your roster, a big 2 or a big 3, you're going to have holes elsewhere. It's really interesting. What did we say about the Kevin Durant and Devin Booker Phoenix Suns, especially when they had Bradley Beal? They're inconsistent because they can't guard anybody. Well, now what are we saying about the LeBron and Luka Lakers? The exact same thing. And so Phoenix, they trade Kevin Durant because the star idea of, we're buddies, we're going to play together, we're going to have this amazing offense, and that'll be all we need, kind of didn't work. And now they're finding a better model by replacing a top 10 all-time scorer with a grit and grind Dillon Brooks, who just, is a bit more of a compliment to their star Devin Booker. And I think with the Lakers, ultimately, that should be the end game. The Luka and LeBron stuff can be really fun, Showtime. You get a lot of the celebrities sitting courtside who want to see this thing happen. But ultimately, if Luka is your main guy, the path towards a better, well-rounded team that supports him kind of requires LeBron to be the odd man out and to be the guy who moves on. And that's not really going to happen this year. I don't think that'll probably happen, at earliest this summer. But Phoenix is actually an interesting example for the Lakers to see, what the fruits can be if you switch up a star core that's a little bit too redundant, right? Where they have some of the same skill sets and they're not really able to make each other better. But it's a huge shift. I mean, you go back to the Miami Heat days when they're putting together LeBron, D-Wade, and Chris Bosh. All you need is talent. Don't worry about anything else. Just get the big names and everything else will work itself out. And that's not really the case anymore in the NBA.
Really isn't. I'm talking with Ben Golliver, Washington Post, here on the Deep Dive on Hoop City with Paul Sir. Last night, first of all, I want to show the contrasts in the league. Lakers lose 135 to 117 to the Hornets. The Hornets have had some quality wins lately. LaMelo Ball looked like a guy you'd want on your team for one night last night. I don't know if you'd want him on for a whole season either. He's one of those guys. Again, you go, do you really want that guy as your lead guy? 135-117. Thunder wallop the Rockets 111-91. We're back to the bad boys in Detroit in terms of numbers. But that's really interesting, I think, in the league this year, because as you correctly point out, a defensive foundation, and nobody does it better than OKC, is really one of the keys you can never find your way around to win, to be a true, legitimate championship contender. The Thunder had a little bit of a blip. Everybody, we've all talked about it ad nauseum. San Antonio beats them. Oh, they're human. Well, now they're kind of getting back to being inhuman again, and they're getting really tough, and their defense is really locking down. And for 3 quarters, Houston kind of hung in there, and then And that's with SGA only scoring 20 and leading the team in scoring. Very interesting night for the Thunder.
Yeah, look, I think sort of Charlotte's an interesting example of the copycat syndrome. So when the Warriors started making all their threes, it took about 2 or 3 years, but all the NBA teams started to panic and they're like, hey, wow, three is a lot more than two if you're shooting these high volume. It's like they can really blow us out and it can be 15, 20 points and we can get embarrassed. So everybody rushes to the threes and it rushes to like, we got to get as many shooters on the court as possible, smaller lineups. And so you start to see the scores spiking. And when that's happening and everybody can shoot threes now, it's not just a Warriors phenomenon. Well, where's the competitive advantage? Well, the competitive advantage is being able to stop the other team, take
Yes.
away their three-pointers, take away their easy stuff around the basket. And it kind of goes back to defensive identity being what wins. You saw it with the Boston Celtics during their title year, and then you saw it again with the Thunder during their title year. And you're right on the money. I mean, San Antonio, they are like the perfect example of that, right? It's like, well, we've got a whole bunch of guys who can sort of shoot threes. They're trying. They're not the best shooters. But when Wemby's on the court, you can't score. So, good luck. We're going to be able to take care of it. And so it does present a really interesting situation in the NBA where you could have on the same night a team scoring 150 and another team scoring 91 points. You could have a team scoring 80 points and a half and another team loses and they score 91 points in the whole game. It's
Yep.
very, very strange. But what is going to happen when you get to the playoffs is the defense is going to carry it, right? Those are the teams
Yes.
that you kind of have to take the most seriously. Those are the teams most likely that are going to be making the deep runs. And, for me, as just aesthetically, I don't need to see a lot of 150, 148 games. It's not particularly fun. I want the tension. I want the back and forth with the defensive matchups. Who's guarding who? Which teams are on a string forcing turnovers and taking away the other team's star player. That's the stuff that I want to watch. And so it's not to put the Hornets down because this is real progress for them. Being able to have like a top 10 offense that looks functional where the big three with Miller, Knipple, and LaMelo, they actually play really well together. They're complementary. That's why they're getting up all these points. But again, they're very inconsistent as well. So the next step in their development is going to be, because their coach came from Boston, so he's all about threes, and pace. The next step for them is, well, how do you start to have a Celtics-like defense, right? How do you mix in some more guys where you can get some two-way balance? Now you could be a team that makes the play-in tournament and then maybe makes some real progress. So that'll be, probably a 3 to 5 year plan for Charlotte to need to kind of pull that thing together, because they've been bad for a while. But it's progress, at least, to some degree for them. And it's been really fun to watch Knipple. He, I think, got overshadowed at Duke by Cooper Flag. And I think those two guys right now, neck and neck in the Rookie of the Year race. I mean, almost identical stats. Their teams have almost identical records, Dallas and Charlotte. Most people wouldn't have thought that before the season started. And they both just really hit the ground running. They fit this modern archetype of guys who play hard, have the touch and feel. Knipple can shoot it. Cooper can really attack. They just have a lot of layers to their game. Both really, really smart players. And it's making for a great Rookie of the Year race.
You hit something that I think has been one of the most enjoyable characteristics about the NBA this year is there are more teams playing harder than I've seen in a long time. The old days of mid-season, the games are, slow, walking it up, defense softens, the effort just seems to evaporate. I don't see that this year because I know when Charlotte plays, they're going to work hard. They may not be good that night, but they're going to work really hard. Heck, a team like Portland, they're fun to watch.
Yeah.
They're really fun to watch. And how long has it been since you said the Trailblazers are a fun team to watch? And a lot of it's their effort. And the Suns, my gosh, their effort night in and night out is incredible. But that's a real nice trend in the NBA. And it's not the Rick Pitino, we're going to full court press and be like college teams crap, from when he went to the Celtics. It's just guys getting out there and getting it after it like it matters.
I think some of that has been legislated by the league office and the owners. So they changed up the salary cap rules to go more towards an NFL model where they have all these aprons with luxury tax penalties. So that prevents against super teams, right? And it kind of spreads the talent out a little bit more evenly. Their goal is to create more parity. And what you see with the blowouts and the teams not trying hard, usually it's because they don't have anything to play for, right? But they expanded the playoffs, so more teams get into the play-in tournament, right? And they de-emphasized how valuable is the tanking? It's not quite as valuable as it used to be because they changed the way the lottery odds work. And so now you have some teams that they might not be great teams, but at least they still have something to play for, right? There's a carrot in terms of the play-in tournament where they could sneak into it. And then, you have, because the talent is spread out so much, you have a lot of guys who are playing for the next contracts, right? Like, well,
Yeah.
we're not just tied in with this team and that's just who we're going to be. It's like, well, I got to make a name for myself so I can kind of go out there and get paid. And so I do think that the effort level has been good this year, definitely compared to a couple of years ago. And some of it, I've even heard coaches say it this way. It's like, if you don't come out and play hard, you can get embarrassed so fast, right? A team can put
Yeah.
up 150 on you in the blink of an eye because there's
Yes.
so much scoring talent and because the rules do kind of favor offense right now. And so I think that's part of it too. Some of it's by necessity. You just don't want to get embarrassed,
That's right.
but everybody loves the high competitive level. The downside to that, of course, is there's been a lot of injuries. And that's
Right.
like the next thing the NBA has to look at is you got to find a way to kind of keep these guys healthy because everyone is playing hard. And even somebody like Joker, who's been indestructible for years, has been out now for multiple weeks. Wemby has been missing time earlier in this season. Obviously Tatum and Halliburton and Lillard, those guys have been out all year with injuries from last year. And that's just the scary part to me is that, these guys are working so hard. They're covering so much ground. People are breaking down. The NBA is chewing through a lot of players. And you mentioned John Moran earlier. Not only is he kind of a malcontent, he doesn't seem happy in a situation. He can't stay on the court. Zion can't stay on the court. You have this whole generation of guys in their mid-20s. I'm calling it early onset aging, where they're declining now at 25 instead of declining at 32, and that seems like a problem longer term. So, I don't. We get the short-term benefit, I guess, of the competitive games, but I do have that long-term concern.
It's a valid concern, and I think, Ben, trying to put reasons on it is really hard. Okay, so I'll use an example, and these are extreme examples. John Stockton played like almost every game for his entire career, and not a vertical player, but extremely durable. I think he played hard all the time. But playing hard then versus playing hard now, and the talent level is just so much greater and so much deeper on every team now. So that's part of it. I saw the other night, I'm trying to think which team it was, but the spread of minutes was over 10 or 11 guys. I think the player that played the most played like 32 minutes. And then there were a lot of guys in that 18 to 24 minute range. And load management to me should be spread the load out as opposed to sit the guy down for a game and then put him back in and play him 38 minutes. I think in this league today, nobody's going to play 48 and a half minutes a game like Wilt did in 62. That ain't going to happen. But, but in today's game, spreading it out, and some teams seem to be picking up on that. But you're right. The league is going to have to come to some sort of understanding on how they can thwart this trend. And I don't know if it'll be new training techniques, I don't know where it's going to come from because the guys are so athletic. Like Zion and Ja don't have bodies built for 35 minutes a game in this league.
No, and I think you've really seen the coaches treat their stars differently. It was commonplace for stars to average high 30s, not all that long ago. And now it's like Tyrese Maxey is kind of the one guy. Nick Nurse has always been riding his guys, but he plays a lot of minutes, and he's a total outlier in terms of how much he plays compared to most stars. Coming into this season, I made the argument that if Oklahoma City wanted to maximize its chances of going back-to-back, Shea maybe should play 26 minutes a night. It's like you've got the depth. Take some losses along the way, so he's completely fresh by the time it comes to the playoffs, right? Now, that sounds crazy. You're going to play the MVP 26 minutes a night. You're treating him like he's the sixth man or something like that. But there's a level of wear and tear that accumulates over the course of the season. And for Oklahoma City, the real win this year has been they've had so many fourth quarters where they could just shut Shea down early and kind of get him rest that way. So they've sort of backed into a bubble wrap approach with Shea, and I think that's worked out very well for them. But I think it's the right move if you're a coach. If you're running your guy, we're seeing so many injuries, this season with star players that If you're trying to run your guys' minutes up in November, December, January, what's going to be left by the time you get to the playoffs, right? And it's very hard as a coach to not want to turn to your star over and over. I mean, even JJ Redick said that when LeBron missed the first month of the season, he was like, "There's so many nights where I look over at the bench and wish I could put LeBron in to save this thing." And now LeBron's saying, "Hey, I'm questionable for every back-to-back the rest of the season." It's like, yeah, you should be. You're 41 years old.
Absolutely.
So, this body management stuff has become really important to winning in the NBA. And, you're seeing it with some of these teams, by the way, who try to play super hard, aggressive defense. Portland's a great example. They come out of the gate playing, almost that pressure defense you're talking about, the full court press. And surprise, surprise, they've got 5 guards on the injured list 2 months later,
Exactly. You have to pick your spots. You have to be really intelligent. Talking with Ben Golliver from the Washington Post here on Hoop City with Paul Sir. We're doing the deep dive. And before we go to your midseason awards, Ben, I want to talk about one more game last night. Golden State Warriors, like Steph Curry is still a work of art to me. Like the guy is unbelievable. Had another great game last night. Jimmy Butler was superb last night. They beat the Knicks, who are really struggling right now. But, they have some injury issues themselves that are key. But the Warriors, they seem to the ebbs and flows. This is such a long season, but they're in a nice little pocket right now where they seem a little bit more settled, playing a little bit better with a little more confidence. I wouldn't bet the house on them at all, as they're not like similar to the Lakers. They're not built to be a championship team this year, but I'm glad to see them playing a bit better.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot of fun. When Curry still, it's 37, not 38 yet, right? Like Curry,
it's coming though.
It's coming quick. The guy is still at 37 is incredible.
Well, so this goes to the NBA scheduling and the NBA Cup, because a lot of things had to change to maneuver with the schedule to set up the Cup matchups, because all the Cup games early in the Cup that take place in November are against your own Western Conference opponents, right? And so it really required some strange scheduling stuff where a lot of Eastern Conference teams played a lot of Eastern Conference teams early in the season and vice versa with Western Conference teams. Now, for whatever reason, the Warriors were not one of those teams. So early on, they had these crazy road trips with a whole bunch of back-to-backs, and Steve Kerr was complaining about it the entire time. And, this has become exacerbated because of this NBA Cup deal. Well, they're finally coming back to the other side of it. I think I heard they don't leave the state of California for the entire month of January, something along those lines. Like they have a whole huge homestand, but then also their road games are just very close and nearby. And so they just are, they were victims of the schedule early, and now the schedule is coming back to them right now. And so it puts a lot of pressure on the coaching staff, though, because that whole first stretch of the year, you have to just preach patience. Guys, we know we're taking some losses here. Don't let this season go south. Keep your head in the game. And that's easier with players like Curry and Jimmy Butler and Draymond, who know the ebbs and flows that you're talking about. But I think these are stronger ebb and flows really than we've seen in the past. So I'm glad it's coming back. The analytic dork guys would say, well, of course it's coming back. They're playing all these home games and they already had their toughest part of the schedule. And so it's going to work out just fine. A flip side to this actually would be the Pistons, where they had only played like Eastern Conference teams for the first 2 months of the season practically. Then they, started to pick up some losses because their schedule balanced out. They came out to the West and lost to some Western Conference teams. So it makes it tricky for analysts to know exactly who's really good, right? Because the schedule has become a bigger factor. But, it's just something to keep in mind. The Knicks, who you mentioned real quick, good example of this idea of parity, right? I mean, they have an MVP caliber player with Jalen Brunson. He goes down, and they can't beat anybody, right? What is your margin for error? I mean, they've loaded up all these veterans, Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges. Those are huge moves to grab those guys. They're paying all those guys tons of money. Think about all the draft picks they parted with to get those guys. But if they don't have the captain, the guy who stirs the drink, they're very beatable by everybody, every single night, even though they won the NBA Cup and they had this great momentum earlier in the season, right? So the parity stuff is real. You got to have your stars healthy, or you're going to be in a world of hurt.
100%. And by the way, the cup to me is the winning the cups. That's sugar. That's a glazed donut. That's not a real meal to me. Like, it's nice, but I'm not a cup guy. I'm not a cup fan. I think it's more of a distraction than it is a positive myself for the season. I really don't know the net benefit to the league. But Ben, I want to get to your midseason awards. The fact that we're talking midseason already, it seemed, that it always seems every year that it takes a long time for the season to finally get going. Then all of a sudden you're halfway through it.
Right.
What's of your midseason awards picks? What's your most surprising one?
Well, I think the fact that we have a real rookie of the year race, like I mentioned earlier, was a bit of surprise. I think a lot of people thought Cooper would run away with it because he ran away with college player of the year and ran away with the high school player of the year. But the other really interesting race for me this year is most improved player. And I went with Denny Avdia. When the Blazers traded for him a couple of years ago, and it was sort of like almost a buy low. I mean, Washington was trying to go deeper into a rebuild, and Denny just didn't really kind of fit their timeline because he was a couple of years too old for a deep rebuild. And last year he was good. I mean, he was a good player for Portland. This year he's a borderline all-star, maybe should be an all-star. Huge numbers, big two-way contributor. The guy who I sort of compared him to was a young Jimmy Butler because he started off in that defensive and energy role, and he just gradually earned more and more responsibility from his coaches. And then all of a sudden he's scoring like a star when he's like 25, 26 years old, and everybody's looking around saying, this guy was always this good? We didn't know this guy was this good. So I think Denny's breakthrough has been a pretty big story for Portland. I mean, they've needed a guy ever since they traded away Damian Lillard, and they're still waiting for Lillard's comeback, obviously. But what a great story. He does it through, just nonstop drives, physicality, get to the rim, get to the free throw line. He maintains the defensive standard, even though he's done all this more, additional offense, still brings it defensively. And a guy who, you don't want to say Washington gave up on him a couple years ago, but they kind of did. I mean, they just kind of, sent him packing. And
it's not yet, but to me, it's an SGA oversight. Like you weren't patient enough to wait for this guy to see what he could really become. I interrupted. Please continue.
No, it's an interesting comparison. I mean, the crazy part when you look back to like his Wizards tenure, at that time when Beal was still there, they hadn't quite given up, quote unquote. They hadn't really submitted to the idea of a deep rebuild. And so because of that, it's like, well, everything has to run through Brad. Everybody else has to be a role player. And so they never even gave him the chance to experiment. And then now you look at the current Wizards, they're giving everybody a chance to experiment. I mean, you got these guys like Bub Carrington, Keyshawn George. I mean, all these guys who really don't have a huge reputation in the NBA getting a chance to try to do a lot on offense, and it's working for Keyshawn George. It's not working for Bub Carrington. But I keep thinking, imagine if Denny had the freedom that the Wizards young guys have currently. A couple years ago, he probably would have shown more early in his career, and maybe Washington never trades him, right? So it's a tough spot for them to be in. Obviously, they get some draft picks back for him in the trade, and we'll see how those picks develop. But for Portland, it was like a star just landed in their lap, and you don't see that too much.
No, you don't. And he's one of the reasons. I know he's out right now, but he's one of the reasons I love watching Portland. I love watching this kid play. He is tough. He's hard-nosed. The fact that he's Jewish is it's really interesting. I have a lot of friends of the persuasion, and they're just excited as all get out that a player from a country that basketball just has never been able to really break into the NBA, with very, very rare exception. And his work ethic, his IQ, everything about his game is really wonderful to watch. And I'm hoping Portland, with their patience again, Sharp, the Canadians, playing really well. He's really coming into his own. When they get healthy, they're a lot of fun to watch. And I think they're 7-3 in their last 10, and they've beaten some good teams along the way. So as the second half of the season unfolds, they're going to be an interesting squad to watch in a very tough Western Conference.
Hopefully they start getting some of these guys back who have been injured, and then now maybe they can really make a push. Portland's had the reputation, for these last few years of like the hardcore tank, the shutdown. And you can't do that when you have a player who's playing like Denny. At some point it becomes kind of untenable. And so maybe they're going to make a push and get into that play-in tournament. for the first time in a while, and they'll have something to play for. I think that would be a successful story, especially considering that their coach got arrested by the FBI right at the beginning of the season. I mean, that's some pretty good
That's a
team
setback.
chemistry to be able to keep it together, right?
Absolutely. It's actually a very cool story that mostly flies under the radar in the NBA, but I'm glad you brought that out. Now, talk about your MVP selection.
Well,
what your thoughts are.
I go Joker. I don't really overthink this one too much. I think the big story, though, when it comes to MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, is the NBA has this rule now: you have to play 65 games.
That was my
And
next
so-
question. So great.
To me, Joker, he's the favorite. He's been the best player in the NBA. I mean, Denver's been, number one offense. He's averaging a triple-double. It's sort of like Oscar Robertson back in the day, crazy numbers. But if he doesn't get back by month's end, he won't be eligible. And so now we're looking at, well, maybe Shea gets it by default, or maybe somebody else sneaks up and gets it, like a Jaylen Brown or a Jalen Brunson, guys who we would never compare to Joker as players, right? And, it's just there's a clear tier there. On the Defensive Player of the Year front, Wemby was the best Defensive Player of the Year last year. He couldn't get the award because he had the blood clot. He had the calf strain earlier this season. He's missed time kind of here and there. He came off the bench for a stretch. If he misses a couple more games, he won't be eligible to win it this year either. And so now your two most prestigious award races are potentially being impacted by this 65-game rule. They put the 65-game rule in to cut down on load management. But now what's actually happening is players who are having legitimate injuries are getting punished and not able to win the awards because of those injuries, right? So I wonder, depending on how these unfold, especially if Joker and Wemby aren't eligible to win this year, whether the NBA will look at that rule again and say, do we need to lower the threshold? Maybe it's 60 games or something else. Or do we just get rid of that rule and say, hey, it was a good idea at the time, but now it's just untenable because we have so many stars getting injured? I don't know if they would do that or not. You're still going to have worthy winners. I mean, Shea would be a very worthy MVP this year, obviously, right? Defensive Player of the Year might be Gobert or Chet Holmgren or Bam Adebayo if Wemby can't win it. But we're all going to look around and say, well, the real Defensive Player of the Year is that guy down in San Antonio who has the bald head right now. The real MVP is the big horseman in Denver, right? So I don't know. How do you feel about it, historically, right? This has been a recent problem. I mean, MVPs typically have never had a trouble getting to 65 games played. I mean, that's just been a default number. I think when the NBA put that in, they thought it was a low bar. And now we're finding out, well, maybe it's not low enough.
Final segment. We're going to take the show home today here on Sports 1440. Paul Sir along with Josh Fenwick. Josh, as we go into our last segment, let's talk about the poll today. Who is the best closer? Who is the person you want with the basketball in their hands as the game is winding down? We had 4 great choices.
4 great choices, and it's evenly split.
Seriously.
Between 2 people.
Okay.
SGA and Nikola Jokic. They trumped the voting. Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic got no votes when it came to the Twitter poll.
Are you surprised at that?
I've got to say no on this one. I'm not surprised in the slightest, honestly.
Likewise. I mean, I think everybody who watches the game, who is familiar with the game of basketball, what's going on in the NBA, the kind of seasons Nikola Jokic and SGA are having, the kind of seasons their teams are having, that I think, once again, kudos to all of our listeners. You made great choices, and thank you so much for participating in our poll today. I really enjoyed the segment that we had talking about Wilt Chamberlain and talking about players that have made historical contributions, and thanks for folks that sent their recommendations in, and we're going to try to do that every week. And believe me, Earl is going to get his opportunity coming up in the future. Boykin is a very interesting story, a 5'7" player who
5'5", Paul.
5'5". Okay, I'm heightening him, and 5'5". When you have players like Boykin, like Muggsy Bogues, who come into the league at that size and are that effective and that impactful, you got to talk about them at some point. So that's going to be coming up in the future. There's some great games to watch this weekend and in this upcoming week. And I'm going to start with the NCAA. There's a couple of really interesting matchups. One is with Brigham Young University, who has been, I wouldn't call it a surprising powerhouse this year, but they've only lost once. They have one of the best players in that will be either one or two in the draft this year. Somebody who's there because of NIL money. Rumors have it somewhere between $8 and $10 million for his 1 year that he's going to probably spend. Well, I'm going to take this back. I am curious, Josh, how many players are going to stay in the NCAA moving forward? You're already seeing that in football, where players want to stay in the NCAA longer because they can make more money in the NCAA in the upcoming year or two than they can in the NBA. So we'll see if some of the marquee players actually stay in college because of the financial compensation that they're going to be they're receiving. But BYU is going to be squaring off against Texas Tech. Tech, I think, is rated about 15th. They just beat a very strong Iowa State team this week. That's going to be a powerhouse matchup, as is John Calipari, the ex-Kentucky coach. His very tough Arkansas Razorbacks are going to be squaring off against a top 20 Georgia Bulldog team, also very, very good. On the women's side, I'm going to mention BYU again because of the Alberta connection with BYU. We have a player from Raymond, Alberta, Delaney Gibb, who has had a fantastic, she was Rookie of the Year in the Big 12 last year, averaging around 17 a game, has had some big games lately against the ranked Baylor Bears. They're going to be squaring off as well. And then a team that is of historic importance to women's basketball at the NCAA level, Tennessee, under the great Pat Summitt in the good old days of women's basketball, when Tennessee was a UCLA Bruin-like dynasty. They're going to play against a ranked Alabama team. And then in the Big Ten, I can't even believe I'm using these teams as being part of the Big Ten. Maryland at 12 and UCLA at 3 are going to be squaring off. And then my Iowa Hawkeyes women's team will be playing. They're ranked in the teens, as is Michigan State. They're going to be squaring off as well. Josh, do you watch NCAA basketball?
This is the time of year where I start getting into it a little more as we eke ever so close to March Madness. I got to start watching. I got to get my player scouting in. I got to get my team scouting in so I can be the first person to ever build a perfect bracket.
And you're going to be the guy. If anybody can do it, I know it's you, Josh.
All right, thanks. I'm hoping this year's the year.
There's no smoke in that. That was all sincere.
Yeah.
And on the NBA level, there's a couple of really good matchups that I'm looking forward to. One's a weird one, and the weird one is the Golden State Warriors against the Hornets. And the reason I'm using that one is because the Hornets just walloped the Lakers, and the Hornets have had some quality wins as they've been healthier again. LaMelo Ball the other night had a triple-double, and the Hornets have some talent, both young and old. Con Kneppel, who Ben Golliver talked about being neck and neck with Cooper Flagg for the Rookie of the Year this year, both Dukies from last year. Kneppel's been a revelation, I think, in the league. And Charlotte is starting to come on and starting to find their legs. The Raptors are going to square off against the defenseless Lakers, and I think that's a good term for them. You know what I mean? Defenseless has this victim ramification to it. But when you look at the Lakers and the fact that they cannot play defense, I think defenseless, Josh, is actually a pretty good word for them.
Yeah, they the struggles, even the most casual of all casual basketball fans, maybe you're just getting into it, you watch the Los Angeles Lakers.
What are they doing?
They could not stop someone shooting at the side of a barn.
They really can't. They're right now they're hapless. And as we talked about with Ben, are they going to make a move this year, or are they going to plan for the longer term as they build around Luka Doncic, who leads the NBA in scoring? Another matchup I'm really looking forward to are the Minnesota Timberwolves against the San Antonio Spurs. Now, the Wolves have injury issues with the great Anthony Edwards, who has been out for a couple of games now. Last night, they played against the Houston Rockets. Kevin Durant was the Durant of old with 39 points, and I think it's a fair way, Josh, to describe it when you say that Durant willed his way to a victory for the Rockets over a surging Timberwolves team who I don't want to say they're not shocking people, but maybe mildly surprising people after starting the year beating sub-500 teams. But as the year has gone on, they have started consistently beating teams with records over 500. Julius Randle is playing fantastic along with Edwards. But I think even Rudy Gobert, he's being mentioned again in the same breath with Wembanyama as Defensive Player of the Year in the league. He's having a fantastic season with even a slightly better offensive production, and his rebounding numbers are up. I think the T-Wolves have done very well. And, of course, San Antonio had all of us talking as they had beaten the OKC Thunder, who seemed invincible at the time, in three consecutive contests. Now, recently, the Thunder just beat them by 20, and I think it's safe to say are reasserting themselves up to the head of the class as the best team in the NBA. But I think with the Minnesota Timberwolves, particularly if Edwards is healthy and back, with that young core of rapidly developing talent in San Antonio, that should be a fun matchup, don't you think, Josh?
Yeah, I fully agree. This game is tonight, by the way.
Yeah.
I love watching the Spurs play basketball.
They are fun to watch. That young team, they've got such an interesting blend of talent. Wembanyama is unbelievable. If he is able to stay healthy for the rest of the year, which I hope he does, because he has to be the Defensive Player of the Year. The blocks this guy has are outrageous. Two-hand, taking the ball high off the glass before it reaches the peak of the arc, so it's not a goaltend. Remarkable. But they had a sequence the other night, and if you may have seen it on social media, but it's Wemby making one of those two-handed blocks, outletting the ball, sprinting down the court, trailing, catching the ball, and hitting a deep three. And I'm not talking toe on the line. I'm talking 4 feet back. And I think that ability that Wembanyama has, combined with his willingness to now go into the low block and go to work with his back to the basket, has really, I think is one of those revolutionary moments in the game of basketball where a tall athlete can be that skilled, that developed at such a young age. And it's bringing so much excitement. And with the dynamic group of youth that's built around him, they're really fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Steph Castle's game. I love.
He's really nice.
I love everything he does.
And you know what? It kind of goes back to a couple of our segments today, talking about effort. The effort on both sides of the ball by Castle. His versatility offensively is fun to watch, but his defensive lockdown mentality is also fun to watch. Like, he's out there putting it on the line, whether he's guarding SGA or Ant or whoever he is. It's 100% all the time. San Antonio is among the many teams that are so fun to watch right now, and I'm really, really excited about this weekend. Now, we're coming up to the end of our show. Always at this time at the end of our show, we play David's song by My Son Ben, written by My Son Ben, with his band Worst Days Down. David's song was a tribute to David Finkelman, who was tragically killed at an intersection by a careless driver, to the heartbreak of his family and many others. Our son Ben, we lost, will be going on 3 years now. And always in paying tribute to our son Ben, to David, to loved ones that everyone may have in their lives. Remember to treasure the people that are most important to you. Tell them you love them. Make sure you go out of your way to be good to those that you love. And always think the best of others. No matter what their life circumstances are, we can't walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Treat people with kindness, treat them with respect, and let's go out of our ways to help one another out. Josh, it's been a great show. I really appreciate all that you do every week, but thank you so much for today.
No, you're welcome, Paul. It's a pleasure to be in here on Saturdays with you. So looking forward to the next one already.
Same here, and we're going to have a great show again next week. And in the meanwhile, enjoy all the fantastic basketball, NCAA, local college, high school, etc. But I'll also enjoy the football this weekend, too. There's some compelling matchups, and, of course, our Edmonton Oilers will be battling. I'm actually going to my first game of the season tomorrow night with my son, Sam, and we're really excited to go watch the Oilers play. So thank you, everyone, for watching Hoop City with Paul Sir here on your sports leader, Sports 1440. Have a great week on and off the court.